Good morning, everybody. Thank you. Uh, Thanks, Mr. Batra, to giving the opportunity to attend the session, and then Raman sir, so enlightening, innovative ideas to be inculcated in our mind. I represent Bihar School Examination Board here. You know, and we all know, that the image of our education system, as a state education system, the 4 years back, how it was there, and then since there, how it has been changed from last 3-4 years. So we, under guidance of our CM and our chairman, Anand Kishore sir, we took the challenge to revamp our whatever was there, to revamp it, to rewrite it again, and give the second chance for everybody, for every person who have the belief in the system, who have the courage to change it. So show them and then do it. That was our goal. And I was mostly in corporate world. I'm a developer, mostly writing the code. I started working with Oracle, and after that, I have the contact with the education department, and then came to know all those things. I passed out from Bihar, so I want to get and give something back, and then that was the opportunity, and that was the vision which we initiated from that point. We all know that the masses are there. At the time, just I will give you the figure. Every year, for the just 10th and 12th, we have the 30 lakh student participated. We have the 1 month of the examination cycle. We have, before my joining, there were 6 months of the overall examination cycle. And then apart from there, we have the vested to having the quality, ensure the quality education, ensure the policy in terms of the policy and school affiliations, grant, all those things. So how, these are the figures, I have put it across you, so that you should know how was the thing and how it has been changed after that. You know, from last year, 2019, the first day of the exam was 6 February, and then result declaration date was 30th March. The first day from 6 February to 14th February, and then within the 40 days, we declared the result. And that was because the seamless process, we put it, all the things what digitization can do in the education domain. All the innovations, simple things. I have come across many things that we don't need the robot, we don't need the AI, we don't need all the data analytics to change the prospect of any problem we want to change. And India is largely dependent on those. The poor people, all the bad infrastructure, all this is still existing, but we have to show something that if we can implement something, if we can put some of the digitized things, whatever we have learned in our problem solving skills, we can do it. The basic thing, the first time when I joined, there was the paper form. The people were collecting the OMRs, even not the OMR, it was just some of the ICR sheets, we said, OMR type, where we get the basic thing, details, and then get it writing back in the computer. There were translation mistakes, all those things, and still from the last so many years, people are still coming to our board to change their father's name, change their titles, all those things. Because of all these things, the paperwork. The first thing we did the online registration, online examination form filling. And then we give the dummy admit card to the student. So nowadays, everybody has their mobile. It's not the mobile technology has penetrated to the lower level. So whatever it's been, whatever they have filled, they have given the data, it's been shown there. And this was the just simple steps, and it was the remarkable achievement. The parents, schools, and the students have the faith that they don't get whatever they have, they can achieve. And then after that came the examination system. How we can revamp the examination system? We put the simple answer book where the name was written on that paper, and then everybody was knowing normally mass cheating practice, and then evaluators, and the managing the system. So just by doing the simple changes, answer script changes, wherever the name and all those things were there, we have tear it up. We put the virtual number instead of that. So now the evaluator doesn't know that whose copy is this, Arjun Kumar or somebody. They have to put the numbers against that some virtual number. So, and then this saying is easy, but I will say that the 30 lakh student, and there are 6 copiers. So more than 2 crore answer books, and then tearing their details, and then again adding it when the result processing happens. So all these things need to be done seamlessly within the required time manner. It's need a system, a fruitful, without failing, we have to give the, assemble all the results properly. That was the challenge, and we did it. We did it. From last 3 years, we are doing it better day by day. Use of the technology at every point, every places. When I joined, there was no computer at all. You can't believe the Bihar School Examination Board, which is representing the around 10 crore people, and there was no computer at all in our system. I have to work with my laptop from starting, and we have to build a system. I was the person in the IT. Sir had given me to put the system in place, and I was in charge, and I recruited the people, like-minded people, who have the passion to change it. It's not easy. We can say that in Delhi, we can get the good people, good engineers, but in back Patna, we don't have the people who want to do it, change it. They don't have the passion to. So encouraging them, putting the pieces together was challenge. And then, but we say that when you have the belief, it will be. So we put it together and then finally did it. Now, at this time, we have our own data center. We have our infrastructure, LAN network, Wi-Fi, complete Wi-Fi network in our premises. And we have our regional centers. Recently, we have inaugurated our regional centers in Delhi to give the services to the student, because many of the, most of the Bihar students migrated to NCR for better education, jobs, and different prospects. We want to facilitate them with our service center, and we are getting the good response for this. Because of all these things, but I believe it, that when you took the challenge, you have to do it. You don't have to sleep within time period. You have to give it 100%, more than 100%. You have to. The team building is there. everybody will be there, but you have to take the lead and deliver it. And just the simple things, the analytics, we went to that which school is not doing good. After getting the data all the online, then we tried to get implemented our education budget. We gave the pointers to the government, education department, the particular district, particular schools, particular area, particular blocks is lagging behind the particular math, English, or other literature. So we have the now data. Once you have the data, you can talk it. Without data, you can't. So the thing was, we have the data, we have the people, and now we can say that this thing can be implemented via particular things. Government want to give the scholarship, but which school, which people? They are not. They doesn't have those pointers. We gave the pointers. So as a computer engineer, I see when you have the data, when you have the system, you want to give it. These are the pointers you can give it, and then these are the like cutting mass. If you want to go to the masses with the policy, the challenges you have to face, and these are the challenges you have to face, and then you have to take it and then give it back. The people have the faith in the system now, and they want to see their child to be enrolled in our board. That is our achievement, and then people are seeing it. People are watching us. Thanks.
Firstly, for Dr. Anurag Batra's teacher in the room from school, can I see your hand up? His MDI teachers in the school, can we see? So can we just give a big round of applause to the teacher who makes all this happen? A louder one. This time I'm not sparing you. A still louder one. Come on. It's great exercise for your marginally better. Still there are some who need to change like me. Well, thank you very much for having me here. And I do want to mention that everything that needs to be said actually has been really said. You needed only one keynote speaker for the change that ought to be, and that was, I think, what the Untitled Tinkering Lab is doing across the country. But the challenges that you just heard from Bihar, one of the large boards, one of the key performing states in so many ways, whether it is IITs or the UPSC, I think the challenges of numbers and how technology has really brought it around. Something to do or must be done comes from the tinkering labs and our children, and what has been done comes from Bihar. If you fail to plan, you will plan to fail. And Shiv Khera said, if you prepare them well, you won't have to repair them. Interestingly, there are nature examples that tell you exactly how this can work in terms of how people have harnessed all the energies to making this world a possible place and reducing wastage. And the best example, I think, is from Bosnia. I'm sure many have heard of this river Nevrita that actually flows down. Doesn't sound like technology, right? But the best examples came from nature. Comes down Bosnia and joins the Adriatic Sea, and all this lovely fresh water that's coming down or trickling down as small rivulets actually get lost. And so the government had decided that in a small plateau in front of them, before the water actually joins the Adriatic Sea, you have them harnessed and diverted towards various sides so that the fresh water can be harnessed. Today, in technology, we are standing at crossroads. We need to see how before things, manpower, intelligence, and all the willpower that's available collectively in our youth and young people is not lost into Adriatic Sea and it's harnessed well. But here is a country in layers. And in the enthusiasm of technology, we are not forgetting clearly that on one side, we are still tackling with the issue of equity, access, and quality education to millions of children. And a staggering number is still outside school, and worse with women. We are no social scientists to place data to say that this must be done, except to say that like in Israel, they said not even a retarded child needs to be out of school, because that brings down the economy of a given set of societal and communities. On the other side, it's so interesting that we are dealing with millennials, a generation that goes to Amazon for shopping, that goes to Netflix for entertainment, that goes to Ola and Uber for travel, and that goes to Alexa and Siri for information. What is our role? And all that I can see within my horizon and my spectrum is my lot of energy that is invested in teachers and schools to make sure that this entitled generation of millennials also understand their role as receivers. And therefore, we should not forget that we have reasons to believe that we have to now have education for a really changing world. Some tongue twisters, you know, by 2040, and a lot of people who are dealing with technology every day, and a lot of Indians, as Dr. Batra said, leading our technology world across, the jobs in 2040. We are preparing children for some jobs in 2040 that sound like tongue twisters, and we don't know what subject actually makes them equipped for it. Hence, from a very teacher's perspective, this is what I have to say, and I'm trying to pronounce it. The jobs look something like this: algorithm designer, virtual stone manager, robo-mediator, biomanufacturing organ designer, augmented 7 reality designer, extinct species revivalist. I'm wondering, are we really prepared to hand over our millennials just 10 years or 15 years from now to deal with jobs like this? Are we really prepared as policy people, as leadership roles, as teachers, and as people, parents, society, communities that shows readiness to deal with this? Somebody said, don't change your roles. Let the policy very clearly say and do what it needs to. And I think people like Mr. Ramanan would be actively engaged in not only making that happen, but making the rest of availability of resources to make these people happen. Then we have leaders, and I can see one thing very clearly from my perspective, that the only people who can make this difference are the educators. People have to make sure that what we give them as teachers, and very far removed from the current roles that we play, we need to really make sure that this readiness actually will be. So listening to, in the last Economic Forum said, World Economic Forum said, that what you find, and it's a Gallup survey report as well, that 85% people today are either disengaged or actively disengaged from their work. And if you look at the youth statistics, you still have cases of suicide, you have cases of aggression, you have cases of violence, you have cases of different kinds of problems that the youngsters are dealing with, and we need to look at how this balance needs to be maintained. And so, Jack Ma said something very interesting in the last economic forum. He said, if you want education to succeed, then we have to learn to compete with machines. And therefore, what should be the nature of education that we have to offer? And keep in mind that this will always make a difference. There is an economic cost to anything that we lose, but there is a still greater socio-emotional cost that society will need to pay if things are not right. Schools are certainly, therefore, large spaces of ecology, and we need to get away from treading on narrow paths. Our sense of purpose, therefore, today's education must match with the societal and the world demands. Are we? So therefore, what are schools trying to do? Are we still constructing or deconstructing myths that you are living by? What is our risk-focused perspective? Are we content with just the kind of curriculum and its dissemination? Are we really thinking? Everything seems right today, but the navigation seems to be incorrect. You know, I was thinking of also what further has been said about the kind of education we have moved into. Over the last 200 years or so, there is a repetitive model of education. We had a cookie-cutter industrialized model. We are now moving into a society which is so different. So it was okay to teach 40 children by one teacher in the same way that we taught. Today, we need to look at 40 different mindsets, and not within the classroom, but outside of the classroom, outside into the community, and outside into a world which has almost lost its borders. That is the kind of communication we need to get into. Therefore, are we still a farm model? I would rather want my school to be a zoo and not a farm of chicks or cows, but a zoo model where there is a lot of animals which have requirement of different kinds. And it's very interesting to note that this change in schools, and not to be very disappointed, is beginning to happen, because in wanting to over-standardize or deliver to test results, schools have not changed very fast. And the greatest thing that we are looking in is all these innovation labs, all problem-solving abilities, and the very oft-quoted 21st century skills, where we are able to see creativity happen through identification of problems, where there is greater empathy, and each one of this needs to be trained and completely built into our system so that this change actually happens. So when we look at what are those problem-solving skills that we need to give, I think the entire discourse and the narrative around the pedagogies of learning that is happening within the classrooms need to change. I was talking to some expert on technology the other day, and he said, you know, teach from your kindergarten. I mean, and it's happening in many schools. Right from kindergarten, let there be enough lessons on how do you gather data. How do you analyze data? Not just that, how do you do coding? And there is this whole argument or debate on how much of screen time, and there are now experts. If there is a problem, clearly there is a solution, and without any screen time, coding can be taught to children. So when I look at what's happening and how this change is occurring across our school spectrum, I do feel that there's a lot of hope. But how does this happen? I would, if there is any voice here that can actually take our suggestions to the ministries and make things happen, because right now we are at that crossroad where change is happening. What is the kind of teacher education that's happening? Because ultimately it will be the teacher who will be in the key position to make this change happen. We all have to change, because earlier there was only one source of information and one source of dissemination, but I think today we have multiple sources. Children come with a lot of knowledge, and we are just co-learners and co-supporters in this entire journey. One thing that must leave us is that whole fear of the future. I think over the years, time-tested, we have proved over and over again that whatever confronts us we are able to sort it out. Interestingly, there is this beautiful story about a doctor who has been in training, and this is a real life story, who said that the doctor and his assistant, before going for surgery, the assistant often found the doctor sitting quietly, and he said, "What do you do, doc? Do you meditate? Do you pray? What is it that you do and you go into the zone of silence before you actually go in for your next procedure?" He says, "Yes, I do. I'm neither a theist nor an atheist. I just tell myself that I have received training enough on the procedures. The body that I deal with is giving me the signals, and I should not be in my auto mode to make sure that I recognize these signals where work is to happen, and therefore I quieten myself to be clear and take away the baggage." I see a similar metaphor. This metaphor I see similarly happening to teachers. Put the teacher there, give her the requisite training, tell her to solve problems as much as we are helping children solve problems, give her the and all managements to give sufficient resources and pay attention to managing this change within organizations and systems to make sure that all this happens, and I'm sure it will happen, and the teacher is also not in any auto mode. All of us, I think at least my generation, when we grew up, we didn't have this fancy toy, and we have all learned it as fast. I'm talking of the cell phones, and worse, the shelf life of the brands of cell phones, which changes literally in every, will it be incorrect to say 6 months? It changes even earlier. So therefore, that is the speed. But I have great faith in people like Dr. Mashilkar, who said once, "Never be afraid of change. It is happening all the time, and we have all survived. We are not the last man left on the island, and even if we are, we'll find all our living partners around us help us survive." And therefore he said that, growth and change are like a pond of lilies. The flower of lily has this innate ability to double every night. And the third day or the fourth day, it is doubling at a geometric proportion. And then he stopped to ask, when is your pond half empty? The pond is half empty just yesterday. It doesn't take the same time for the pond to fill with lilies as it did over the last half. The next day the pond is full. So friends, I have great faith. I've never distrusted my teacher. Of course, interestingly, Jack Ma, with all his very successful Alibaba, talks about not about the IQ, the EQ, or the SQ, but he says the LQ is the winner, and he uses the love quotient. He says, finally, do you know, all the technologies will take away the content and the text that children need to read, and schools may be just places where there is sport, dance, music, art, and other such things happening, because no problem in this world will be solved by one single person. It will be solved by teams of people, and for making teams happen, you need sports. To make leadership happen, composition happen, you will need all the other softer skills. So a perfect balance. The proverbial teacher in me does not leave the school alone, neither does it allows me to lay less emphasis on the scholastic versus the co-scholastic area. Put it together, bring the labs of the Atal labs into our foray, look at the problems. I can tell you that the final problems will be solved only by the teacher and her training. Give her all the love and respect you need to do. And finally, stay away from fear. And for saying that, who could be better than Khalil Gibran, who said, "It is said that before entering the sea, a river trembles with fear. She looks back at the path she has traveled from the peaks of the mountains, the long winding road crossing forests and villages, and in front of her she sees the ocean so vast that to enter there seems nothing more than to disappear forever. But there is no other way. The river cannot go back. it is impossible even in existence. The river needs to take the risk of entering the ocean, because only then fear will disappear, because that's where the river will know it's not about disappearing into the ocean, but of becoming the ocean. Trust your teacher. She has no fear. Your children are safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Morning has turned to the afternoon, so good afternoon, everybody. Truly thank you, Team Business World Education, for having me here. I think it's very humbling to really stand in front of such a repository of knowledge and experience. And what can I really add after listening to all of you? However, I'm reminded a bit about the Chinese. Of course, I'm not referring to the virus, unfortunate virus that's going around, but the Chinese have a tendency to say that we live in interesting times. Now, this is really an anecdote which reflects a certain sense of chaos that constantly exists as we move on. That's what this line typically means. And I'm kind of reminded that somewhere, if you draw an analogy, I think the Indian education system is somewhere also living in very, very interesting times. I think we are progressing, but there is a certain niggle of chaos that continues to exist somewhere in the system. The ecosystem is very, very large. I think it's if you really combine the goods and services that define the Indian education system, it's almost close to a 25 lakh or a 30 lakh industry, 30 lakh crore industry, I'm sorry. So really, if you really look at it, it's so large, it's so wide, and yet so fragmented. And I see a lot of us operating in silos. And this is where I somewhere recollect the words of, Shri Anil Swarup, and especially in context of the theme that is meant for the inaugural session, which is creating a global edge in Indian education. Somewhere I don't quite agree that we need to really look for a global edge in Indian education. And this is when I recollect Mr. Swarup talking about how we should really not be following practices of Finland. Raghav, you would have heard him multiple times. Finland or England or Scotland, but I think we should just focus on what we can do for our homeland, because our own country has got so much to do in the education space that we should simply start benchmarking what we do within ourselves. And really, if you look at the homeland today, you will realize that it's a pretty dichotomic scenario. You see, on one hand, we've got close to 1.5 million schools. 25% of them are private schools. The enrollment ratio in private schools seems to be going at a much more alarming speed than the government schools. And these are all the numbers that you keep hearing about. You hear about how 62% of the students drop out before 10th standard. You hear about how let's say the enrollment ratio is about 75% plus in the 10th and just drops down to 52% as you get into the 11th. So in a way, the challenges are pretty large. I happen to, since we have now started dealing a lot with the government, I had a chance to go to the tribal schools somewhere in Maharashtra, and there are about close to 480 odd tribal schools, close to 2 lakh children studying there. Challenging situation. I think if you really look at what they're going through, they don't have a proper place to study. There are a lot of the kids who get killed by snake bites. So a lot of things happening on that front. On the other hand, there's a lot of good work happening. None of us really know about how a principal in a very interior district in Maharashtra has actually digitized their school by putting up solar panels and giving a tablet to every child. And this has been done through, just local funding which they have taken from the parents who are economically not very strong. And this gentleman got recognition for this, and soon many other districts of Maharashtra started to follow suit. So really, I think we are living in an ecosystem where there's so much happening, the goods and the bad. Some of the goods are not really known. I know about 8,000 schools in Andhra Pradesh who are actually being catered to by students of IIT, who have actually gone in and digitized those schools and started to completely change the way the learning outcomes happen in those places. In Mumbai, Balwadis and preschools have started gaining enrollments because of intervention from some foundations and NGOs, and they've started to give a better throughput to the BMC schools out there. So a lot is happening. So in such an environment, I think we have a lot of common objectives that as schools we might be wanting to do. But I think I would want to just simply give my personal wish list as follows. I believe that when a child reaches 14 years, he or she should be a confident child. I think he or she should be able to have no stage fright, should be able to talk confidently. He or she should be able to mingle into any ecosystem, should be able to adapt to any ecosystem. A child from the rural area should be able to work very seamlessly and interact with the ones in the urban areas. A child in the urban area should be able to interact and work very seamlessly in the rural areas. And I think somewhere, all these children should be able to apply their thought and articulate what's in their mind to people. Because you see, in the next 10 years, I think information is not going to be a challenge. We're going to be filled with information all around us. How to leverage that information, deploy that information, and talk and share what you want to say and articulate it well is, I think, what would be the need for the child in the next decade. And I think for this, probably my sense would be that 4 or 5 pillars should be very important. I think early child education is very, very critical. 85% of the brain seems to develop in the first 7 years, and I think there needs to be a lot of focus on that. Teaching as a profession needs to certainly get a big impetus. If you ask a youngster today, what would you like to become when you grow up, or what would you like to do as a job, I'm not sure many of them would say, I'd like to become a teacher. I think we need to reach that space. The parent outlook has to undergo a change. I think if you ask a parent, what would you like a child to do? How many of the parents would end up saying, I'd like my child to do whatever they want to do? I don't know if that is an answer that you keep hearing. You still have parents who want them to do X, Y, and Z. I think somewhere we need to expose our children to all the states of our country. I think part of the curriculum should be for them to know about every single state of ours and to also know about other countries in the world. I think that exposure levels are very, very important. And finally, I think vocational education in schools, I think while it is there, I think should be given a far better impetus. There is no doubt that all this cannot be done without technology. I think technology has to build scale. We can never do without it. It's fascinating to see how the edtech companies, the techies have started to interact with schools, academia, classrooms, how they started to understand what happens inside a classroom and work out products. However, my belief is that somewhere I think the edtech folks need to start working on a model which will start getting them to go wider and deeper into the hinterland of India. I think the accessibility is restricted to few in the urban and the tier 1 cities. So as I conclude, really, and this is all that I had to say, I think somewhere while we continue to live in interesting times, I think somewhere I would be having a wish list that some conference like this happens in Finland or Switzerland or some other place where the theme would be creating an Indian edge in our education there. And I think that is what could be a way that we should try to aspire as a group, and I hope we all come together to realize the dream. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much.